Have you ever wondered what it truly means to experience Christ consciousness? Ready to shift your perspective on consciousness and spirituality? What if the story of Christ was never meant to be just a historical event, but a spiritual blueprint, a dormant potential within you, waiting to awaken? Today, we journey into the mystery that bridges ancient spiritual wisdom with modern science. This is Christ's consciousness, decoded through the lens of science and soul. This transmission dives into the latest scientific research, revealing the potential neurological and psychological foundations of this profound state of being. What if Christ was not just a man from history, but a state of being, an awakened consciousness accessible to all of us? Beyond symbols, rituals, and dogma, there is a deeper truth waiting to be remembered. This is Christ's consciousness, decoded, reawakened, and explored. Christ's consciousness is not about converting to a religion. It's about evolving into a higher state of awareness. It is the embodiment of universal love, radical compassion, and divine unity. It's the inner alchemy where the ego dissolves and the soul awakens. In this state, we no longer see ourselves as separate beings, but as expressions of the same divine source. It is the consciousness that says, "I am in the Father, and the Father is in me," not as a claim of exclusivity, but as an invitation to all of humanity. Christ's consciousness isn't about religion. It's not confined to dogma, denomination, or even the man we call Jesus. It's a state of awakened being, where love becomes a living intelligence, where unity overrides separation, and where the divine spark in you recognizes itself in all creation. In the East, they call it Buddha nature. In quantum terms, we may call it non-local awareness. In psychology, it echoes Carl Jung's idea of the self, the totality of our conscious and unconscious mind. Long before Christ walked the earth, this essence existed. In Egypt, the sun god Ra symbolized divine illumination. In India, the concept of Atman represented the divine self within. In Taoism, the Tao flows through all things, reflecting balance and unity. Jesus was not the beginning, but a continuation, a living embodiment of this cosmic truth. Later, mystics like Meister Eckhart, Rumi, and Saint Teresa of Avila all spoke of merging with the divine through inner transformation. Today, modern spiritual seekers interpret Christ consciousness as the potential to awaken the Christ within a divine template coded in the soul of every being. But here's the deeper mystery. Is the brain producing this consciousness, or is it receiving it? Some neuroscientists and quantum theorists suggest that the brain might function more like a transmitter, tuning into a higher frequency of divine awareness. Just as a radio doesn't create music, but receives invisible waves and translates them into sound, so too might the brain receive Christ-like frequencies when we enter states of stillness, surrender, and sacred intention. Could it be that through practice, devotion, and presence, we align our neural circuits with the divine field of consciousness that mystics have always called God? Neuroscientific studies show that deep meditation activates the prefrontal cortex, associated with compassion and moral reasoning. At the same time, the default mode network linked to egoic thinking begins to quiet down. This shift creates what researchers call ego dissolution, where the illusion of separation breaks and we feel one with all that is. It's in this silent inner space that Christ's consciousness begins to emerge, not as a belief, but as an experience, a neurological reality. Now, enter quantum physics. It teaches us that at the smallest level, everything is interconnected. Particles communicate instantly across space. Christ said, "I and the Father are one." Could this be a poetic way of saying, the observer and the observed, the divine and the human, are part of the same unified field? Some physicists even propose consciousness as a fundamental force of the universe, not a byproduct of the brain, but the very fabric of reality itself. And when your consciousness aligns with this field, you don't just believe in love, you become it. So what happens when we truly embrace this consciousness? 1. Redefining the self. We begin to see ourselves not as isolated minds, but as vessels of infinite awareness. The ego becomes the servant. 2. Reimagining reality. If love is the organizing force of the universe, then fear, competition, and separation are illusions. Reality becomes a mirror reflecting our inner state. 3. Reclaiming purpose. Christ's consciousness calls us to live in service to the whole, to heal, to uplift, and to create from a place of unity. Our purpose is no longer just survival. It becomes transcendence. This is not philosophy for the mind alone. It is a lived experience. It is felt in the heart, embodied in action, and expressed in unconditional love. If Christ's consciousness is a divine state of love, compassion, and unity, can science find evidence of its existence in the brain? Surprisingly, yes. And the answers lie in the extraordinary power of the brain to evolve. Neuroplasticity is the brain's innate ability to rewire itself, to form new neural pathways through experience, intention, and repetition. Spiritual practices like meditation, prayer, and mindful breathing have been shown to physically reshape the brain. MRI scans reveal increased gray matter in regions linked to emotional regulation, compassion, higher awareness, and a quieting of the default mode network, the part of the brain most associated with the ego and self-referential thought. When the ego quiets down, the soul starts to speak. In deep meditative states, monks and mystics describe sensations of unity, boundless love, and timeless awareness. These are not mere hallucinations. They're measurable states of altered brain activity. EEG studies show that during profound meditation, the brain enters high-frequency gamma waves, linked to insight, bliss, and oneness. This is the neurological fingerprint of what many call Christ consciousness, a state where the boundaries of the separate self dissolve, and a greater intelligence flows through us. But Christ consciousness is not a miracle reserved for the few. It is a neurospiritual evolution available to all. Every moment you choose love over fear, presence over distraction, compassion over judgment, you are literally rewiring your brain toward higher awareness. You're not just healing your mind, you're becoming a vessel for the divine, and the Christ within, it awakens through you. Now, what happens when the self we think we are begins to unravel? When the stories, fears, and identities we carry simply fall away. What remains is not emptiness, but a profound expansion into what mystics call Christ's consciousness. In this chapter, we explore the psychological dimension of spiritual awakening, how the dissolution of the ego and transpersonal experiences open the gateway to divine awareness. In psychology, the ego is our sense of I, our identity, roles, beliefs, and boundaries. It helps us navigate the world, but it also keeps us separate, trapped in comparison, fear, and survival mode. In the awakening process, this false self begins to crack. It's what mystics call the dark night of the soul, and psychologists like Carl Jung recognized it as the path to individuation, a breaking down of the ego so that the self, the divine core, can emerge. This moment of ego death isn't annihilation, it's liberation. The voice of fear grows quiet. The illusion of separateness dissolves, and in its place, you discover a vast, loving awareness that has always been there. Transpersonal psychology, pioneered by thinkers like Abraham Maslow and Stanislav Grof, studies the states of consciousness that transcend the personal self. These experiences often include a sense of unity with all life, timelessness and bliss, encounters with divine archetypes, a deep inner knowing of purpose and connection. Many who undergo these states through meditation, near-death experiences, or spontaneous awakenings report a Christ-like awareness, a sense of unconditional love, compassion for all beings, and a radiant peace that surpasses understanding. These aren't fantasies. They're the mind reaching beyond itself touching the infinite. But the journey doesn't end with a mystical moment. The real transformation is in integration, bringing the insights of the transpersonal into your everyday life. Christ's consciousness isn't just an experience. It becomes a way of being. It's when forgiveness flows without effort, when presence replaces projection, when you walk through the world not as someone trying to be good, but as someone who remembers they are love itself. Psychologically, this is the birth of the true self, what Jung called the divine center of our being. And in spiritual language, it is the Christ within made manifest. When the ego falls away and the soul steps forward, you begin to see through the eyes of eternity. This is the psychology of awakening. This is the path of Christ's consciousness, not the worship of one enlightened being, but the activation of that same light within you. So let the false self fall. Let the deeper self rise and become what you were always meant to be. What if the awakening of one soul could ripple through an entire civilization? What if Christ consciousness isn't just a personal state, but a collective calling? What will happen when humanity begins to live from the heart, and structures of fear are replaced with systems of love? For centuries, our world has been shaped by division, nations divided by borders, people divided by race, class, and belief. But Christ's consciousness invites a radical shift from competition to compassion, from survival of the fittest to the thriving of all. Imagine education that nourishes the soul, healthcare that heals the whole person, economies that measure success not in profit, but in presence, purpose, and planetary well-being. This is not utopia. It is the natural expression of a spiritually awakened society. In a world governed by ego, justice becomes revenge. But in a world aligned with Christ's consciousness, justice becomes restoration. We no longer seek to punish the broken. We seek to understand and heal the wound. Our systems of law, leadership, and community would begin to reflect higher principles: forgiveness, reconciliation, unity through diversity. When we see others as divine expressions, we no longer create enemies, we create mirrors and opportunities to grow. The earth is not just a planet, it is a living, breathing soul, and humanity is awakening as one of her organs. One consciousness spread across billions of bodies. As Christ's consciousness rises, we begin to think beyond me and mine. We become caretakers of the earth, guardians of the voiceless, and co-creators of a future guided by oneness. This awakening dissolves the illusion of separation between races, genders, religions, and even nations. We begin to act not as isolated tribes, but as one planetary family. Christ consciousness isn't just the evolution of the individual, it is the evolution of humanity. When love becomes our default setting, when empathy guides our institutions, when the sacred is honored in every face, a new world begins to bloom. The kingdom of heaven was never elsewhere. It begins here, with awakened hearts, and the courage to live from them. So if you're wondering what difference your awakening makes, know this: your light is the revolution. Christ consciousness isn't just the evolution of the individual, it is the evolution of humanity. When love becomes our default setting, when empathy guides our institutions, when the sacred is honored in every face, a new world begins to bloom. The kingdom of heaven was never elsewhere. It begins here, with awakened hearts, and the courage to live from them. So if you're wondering what difference your awakening makes, know this: your light is the revolution. The Christ isn't coming from the clouds. It's emerging from within your soul. When you live in coherence, heart, mind, and soul aligned, you awaken your divine potential. When your choices are driven by compassion instead of fear, when your thoughts are tuned to truth instead of illusion, you embody Christ consciousness. It is the rebirth of your highest self, and the science, It's finally catching up to what mystics, sages, and seers have known for millennia, that the light of the divine does not shine upon us, it shines from within us. Christ consciousness is not a destination. It is a remembering, a homecoming to your sacred essence. And now, with science as our ally and spirit as our guide, we step into the greatest revelation of all. You are the light you've been waiting for, and the kingdom of heaven. It has always been within you. The time has come to awaken to the deeper truth that we are not separate fragments, but sacred reflections of one universal presence. Overall, Christ consciousness is to see the divine unity in all beings, in the stranger, in the wounded, even in the ones who challenge us. It is to realize that no action is isolated, no thought without impact, that your inner world shapes the collective reality we share. When you love yourself, you uplift the world. When you forgive another, you free humanity. When you awaken, you light the path for others. This is not metaphor. This is mystical law. This is the sacred science of unity. Let Christ consciousness move from your heart into your hands, into your speech, into the way you show up in the smallest moments. Live with intention, speak with love, create with soul. Let every interaction be a sacred act. Let every breath carry peace. The world doesn't need more opinions. It needs embodied presence. It needs awakened hearts. It needs you, fully alive, deeply connected, and lit from within. So rise each day with a new prayer. Let me see through the eyes of Christ consciousness. And as you do, may you remember, you are not alone. You are not separate. You are one with all that is, and that changes everything. Remember, awaken, embody, illuminate. If this resonated with you, please leave a comment and tell me your take on the Christ consciousness. Until next time, Universal Consciousness, signing out.